Alright guys, we're going to be building a random quote machine in Angular 5, the current version of Angular. Fun little project just to kind of expose you to Angular. We've built it in the past in jQuery, and now we're going to go to the big boy frameworks and do the same thing. You'll see here that we have a nice little green theme to go with it. Click here. It'll bring up a new quote with the new author, and then we have, of course, the ability to go ahead and tweet out what that quote is using some of Twitter's built-in functionality. So let's go ahead and go over what it is that you're going to need to do this project. Hey guys, before we get started, just want to do a quick shout out to Dev Mountain, who sponsored this video. I want to thank them for supporting the channel, and I really like this. Start a career you're proud of. It really reminds me of, like, damn man, I remember when I hated being a pizza delivery driver, and now I'm a developer, and I'm so happy about it. I love the people at Dev Mountain. They're a great boot camp. So if you're looking for one with housing and tuition included, go ahead and check them out. Again, I want to thank them for sponsoring this tutorial. Alright, first and foremost, you're going to need to go ahead and install Node. It's real quick install. You don't need to walk through. It's literally just download this recommended for most user file. It's a desktop installation. Just keep on clicking next, and you'll get done with that eventually. Then there's the Angular CLI. And this is going to be what's going to help us essentially get our project set up. There's a lot of different functionality. I really just use it for that. So we're going to want to npm install in one of our terminals -g, that means globally, the Angular CLI, and then when we create our application, we'll say is ng-new and then the name of it, and then we're good to go, and then we can launch our node server, or our Angular server rather, with ng-serve. Now if you're interested in what terminal I'll be using the hyper terminal, mainly because I can get puppies and cats on it. That being true, but also it has some additional plugins. The open source terminal. So it's just come off like a sponsored video. It's not a sponsored video. I'm just a fan. And it's coded in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Check it out. But that will be what I will be using for this project. So let's go ahead and get started. Make sure you install the Angular CLI. Make sure you install Node, and then just have some sort of terminal that we'll be using to launch this stuff. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Wherever you keep your projects, go to that place on your desktop. I have this new folder called WebDevYouTube. So I'm going to go ahead and launch one of my terminals, and we're going to just instantiate our new Angular application. At this point, you should have installed Node, and you should have installed the Angular CLI. So all we need to do here, now that we have the Angular CLI, to get a new project installed, is just say ng-new and the name of the project. We'll call this random-quote. And this is going to go and create our brand new Angular sort of settings, or not settings, but you'll see the folder gets created here. And it's going to start installing the packages via Yarn, because I have Yarn installed, and I think it actually comes by default in here. But we'll let that install, and we'll come back to some actual coding. Alright, now that we've installed our project, let's go ahead and install Font Awesome Icons. We can do that just by saying npm install. npm should work just fine because we've installed Node, and npm comes with Node by default. So npm install font-awesome. And while that's going, we can go ahead and open up our text editor. I happen to use Visual Studio Code. That's my personal favorite, but you can use all the other janky ones, because this one's the best. No, just use whatever you want, and we'll continue with our project. So go ahead and find that folder, or that project that we were in. Oops. And of course, make sure, I just realized that I installed node modules into my directory and not into my actual project. Make sure you're actually going into your random quote project and installing your font-awesome. Alright, so that's getting installed. Let's go ahead and open up our project. Angular quote. Nope, it's the wrong folder. Sweet. Alright. So We have our random quote file. This is from, let me go ahead and delete that. That's from my bad install earlier. All right, so is it done installing over here? It's still installing. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by cleaning out the crap that we don't need. So by default, Angular comes with some tests installed in here. There's no testing that we actually really need to do. This is a pretty simple application. So we can go ahead and delete all that, save that. In the HTML, we're going to be reworking our own HTML down the road. We'll go ahead and delete that as well. And then in the app component.ts, we can go ahead and get rid of this title property and delete that as well. All right, so by now Font Awesome should be done installing. There's one last thing that we have to install, which is the current version of Bootstrap 4.0-beta.2. You can see I'm just going to go ahead and copy this over. And then we'll go ahead and install that. And not only do we have to install it, we actually have to then go into the application and tell it that we want to use it. And we'll go ahead and showcase that first. So that's going to install. And then what we need to do is, let's go ahead and open up our text editor. Go into our Angular CLI.json. And you'll see here that there's a ton of stuff going on here. One, the name of the project, but what we really care about is this global style sheet here. And what we want to do is we just want to include the Font Awesome icon so that all our applications has that. And it's based off the path node_modules /font -awesome /css /font awesome.css. And then we also want to install Bootstrap, which we just installed as well, which is /node_modules. Oh, and let's see here, fix that, and this will be /bootstrap. And if you go into the /dis/css /bootstrap .css, and if you're actually going to the node modules, you would find all these files. So that's what we're referencing here. But now we have access to be able to use our Font Awesome icons and our Bootstrap CSS that we just installed. All right, so let's start by just creating the files that we need. Now we're going to create one component, and then we're also going to create one service. So typically you would have your services in a service folder. So let's go ahead and create that, services. The service is just going to be the get call. It's going to store the get call to be used and return all the data that we want down the road. So we'll say services, new file. We'll just call this quote.service.ts. And we won't put anything in it yet. We're just doing some setup, and then we'll do a new folder here, and we'll just call this quote-box. This will be essentially our quote box component at the end of the day. And what that needs, it pretty much needs 3 things always. 4 if you're doing testing. We're not focusing on testing here. So the first thing is, and you'll notice the naming convention is going to be identical, right, to the file name, quotebox.component.ts. So that's going to be our component that we're going to be building, or where all our logic goes. Then we have our quote-box.component.html. That's going to be the template for our component. And then if we need it, we're going to have quote-box.component.scss. This is just going to be styling for our component. So now that we've gone ahead and set that up, let's showcase a little bit of what we're going to be using to go and actually get our data. It took me a while to find a random quote thing that wasn't going to give me a course error, which is to elaborate. Essentially, some servers don't let you hit an API from your local host. So I found one that did, which is nice. And so we're going to be creating a model as well. There we go. And so we have 3 things coming back: the category, the author, and the quote. We really only care about the quote and the author for our random quote. And we're going to go ahead and create a model, a class based off of that, so that when our data comes in, we know that it's coming in correctly formatted. So how do we do that? Well, one more folder here to do some setup. And we're gonna have models. Go ahead and instantiate a new class in here, and we're just gonna call this quote dot class.ts, and we'll go ahead and set that up right now. So what we want to do is export a class that we can use in our document other places. So we have this class quote, and quote is going to have two parameters. It's going to have a quote, which will be the string, and we're basing this. You'll notice that we're essentially making these identical, right, as to what it's going to be. And then we have the author, right? So that was what was in the object, public author. And this is a string as well. And now we need a constructor for when we build a new class. And basically this is just us saying, hey, for these things that we instantiated, go ahead and make them part of our object when we create it, or our class when we create it. So we're just gonna create this constructor real quick. And if this doesn't make sense, or it's your first time dealing with constructors and classes, oops, that needs to be author. Don't worry too much about it. Essentially what we're doing is we're just saying, hey, that these values, when we have a constructor, when we create a new class, we want to set this dot quote equal to quote. That's all. And then we want to say this dot author equal to author. What is it complaining about here? Oh, get rid of this public. Get rid of this public. There we go. And so now we have our constructor. So whenever we create a new quote, it will take the values that we're passing in and set the properties that are quote and author here. So let's go ahead and create our Angular service that's going to go and actually get the random quote from the API. And when dealing with services, we're going to need to import the injectable, I don't know if it's called a library or a service or what, where we need injectable from at Angular core. And one of the things that has changed is in Angular 5 they updated the way that they do HTTP calls. So now we're going to also need to import the HTTP client from Angular at Angular /common/HTTP. In the past you would probably have been importing the from Angular /HTTP, but now that would be, although it's deprecated now. It still works, I believe, but it's not something that they recommend that you use. So we're going to have this at injectable, and then we're going to export a class, and this is going to be our quote service that we're going to import into our component later on. And all we need to do here is we need to essentially instantiate what our application is going to be using, which in this case is the HTTP client. And then we can go ahead and set up our get call. Now it's not going to work yet because there's some additional setup that we need to do, not only in the component but actual in the module where we import some of our dependencies. But we'll get to that when we're done here. We're almost done with our service. So we need to create a function called getRandomQuote, and this is going to do exactly that. It's going to go ahead and return a random quote to us. And what we want to do is return this .http.get, and in here we're going to go ahead and pass in the quote. Do I still have it saved? Good. And you'll see here, that's all we're doing for our service is, hey, go ahead and return whatever this gives us. And we are done with our service, but let's go into our app here, into the app module. Now the module is really something that says, hey, all these things that we created, we actually want to use them. And the first thing that we can go ahead and do is import our service that we just created, our quote service. And services will go into the providers array. And we'll go ahead and do services. And so now that we've imported it, go ahead and jump down to the providers. And this will be quote service. Very nice. And one last thing that we need to import for here is the Angular HTTP module. Client module, the HTTP client module. That's what it is. And you'll see here. So this is another new thing that we need to import. And modules go into the imports. And now we have access to our Git call. So let's go ahead and build out our component so that we can actually call that Git call and see the results of it. All right, so last time we finished our service, and now we're gonna go ahead and create a component so that we can actually execute that service as well as actually do all our additional logic. So first thing that we need to do is we have to import component from @AngularCore. Angular/core rather. Now, after that, we just want to go ahead and create our component, basically. Do all the bootstrapping setup stuff. And you can do this by generating a component using the Angular CLI, but I think it's a little bit helpful, and this is how I do it at work normally, just because we don't use the Angular CLI, so it's kind of a habit. But so we have our selector, which is going to be the name of the component when we use it in the template. We're then going to have our template URL, which will actually be the HTML for this specific component, which in our case is just going to be quote-box.component.html, and then we're going to have a style style URLs. It's just be an array with our style sheets. I don't believe we actually have anything in here, but just in case, we will actually set it up because we'll be using Bootstrap for the most part. And then we want to go ahead and export this as a quote box component. This is typically how I would name my components. The file path name in caps, no dashes, and then end-to-end component. You saw earlier I ended in services. So now that we've set that, we have to actually import our service, our quote service, so that we can use it here and instantiate it. Or use it rather, and then add it to the constructor. Services. We don't need the .ts. All right, so now that that's there, let's go ahead and add it to our constructor. Again, if you're still kind of struggling with the constructor syntax, essentially all it is saying, hey, when you build this component, when you construct this component, these are some default things it must have, and here we are instantiating those default things. So public, we'll just call this quote service of type quote service. Sweet. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and subscribe. So let's create some properties here. We're basically just going to have a single quote on the page at one time. So we can go ahead and did I create the models already? Or the quote class? I did. So you see here we have this dot quote. Let's actually go ahead and create an instance of that. So we'll say this dot public quote is equal to new quote. And in here, we're just going to pass in some empty strings. So by default, it's going to have some empty strings in here. And we'll need to import the quote class. And models, quote class. Cool. So the reason that we instantiate this is if we don't, it's going to give us some errors in our template later on. So we're just going to set some default values of empty strings, which in our constructor here, we'll then go ahead and give it some real values, some values that have some meaning. And so we'll say this dot quote service. Oops, why'd you stop typing? Quote service is equal to, dot get random quote. And what we want to do here is we just want to subscribe to this observable and pass the data to it, or have data in here, and we'll just put of type quote. That's really what it's coming through here at the end of the day. And So now that we have that, we can go ahead and say this dot quote. We can just use the class syntax again, is equal to a new quote that is going to be this data dot quote and data dot author. And we'll go ahead and console.log this. And we may get some module errors and things like that, but we'll take care of those right now. So console.log this dot quote. And let's go ahead and actually export this to a function because we're going to be calling this later on a button click. So we might as well take care of that right now. Public function, public get quote. I apologize if I'm making silly mistakes, guys. I just got off work and I'm just trying to finish this project out, so I'm a little tired. I got a cat on my lap, so if you hear purring in the background, that's what it is. Let's go ahead and instantiate, call this dot get quote, so it will instantiate our quote. Sweet. Do we have any compile errors? No. So let's go ahead and launch this real quick, and we'll go to local host 4200 and see if we have any errors. Now, I don't believe we've actually instantiated our application. Sweet, no errors. But I think we're going to get one or two when we go to jump to our modules. So in our app here, in the component, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and just inject our quote box. All right, and let's see, any errors yet? It's reloading. Yes, quote box is not a known element, so we have to go add that to the app module. And you'll see here we imported our quote service, but we didn't actually import our quote box component. We have to give our app module access to it, and so we're going to say quote slash box, quote box. And we remember components go in the declarations area. Go ahead and save that. And is this the winner chicken dinner? Almost. Unexpected value undefined by compiler. What does that mean? Let's go and refresh this one time. Quote box component from quote box. Interesting. I have no idea what that means. Undefined complete. Alright, so it looked like our compiler just messed up. All I did to solve this issue was I just restarted the server, so I closed it out with Control-C, and then I restarted it with the ngserve command. So everything should be the same. If you got that error, that's what I did to solve that issue. Now, so we've added that, and it's cool. We're actually getting our quote, we're getting the author, and we're getting the quote. And we will set this up to a click property, and we can go ahead and add that real quick. I forgot what I actually made this look like, so let me go ahead and launch that real quick. All right, so in here, what we want to do, or excuse me, in our quote dash box template, what we want to do is just go ahead and create a icon real quick called i.fa dash plus. And we'll go ahead and we'll wrap this with a button, and we'll give the button a class of BTN outline success. And on click, I'm gonna add a click function here. We want to go ahead and call the, I believe I called it the get random quote. Is that right? All right, nope, just get quote. And save that. And let's see what we have here. That looks a little strange, but it's working. I don't know. I don't know what. I must have mistyped something. Let's see here. Oh, I forgot BTN in front of it. So that looks like if you added Bootstrap like -1 into Windows 98 or something. There we go. A little bit cleaner. Cool. So let's actually just go ahead and add the Twitter icon, because that was another functionality, and the rest is just going to be CSS and HTML, and we should be able to handle that easily enough. So we'll add a button here, and we will add the btn.btn-outline-success. And we'll go ahead and add i.fa.fa-Twitter. We'll add our Twitter icon. And the way that I did this was I simply I actually changed this button to an anchor tag. And we went ahead and we opened this, set target equal to blank, and then let's go ahead and change this button tag to an anchor tag again. And then there was a route or a URL that Twitter has that we can append our data to. So let's go ahead and set we're gonna just give a little bit of space here. And then in here, we're gonna create a dynamic href. And this first part is going to be a string that we're passing in that we're going to then add some stuff to. So you'll see here we're passing in this twitter.com/intent/tweet query string text equals, and at the end of this text equal, what we want it to be is just be our quote, and that'll be print out our quote. You know what? Maybe quote.quote is good. We can refactor it later. I was just thinking I didn't add the author to this. I think it's okay for what we're trying to do here, but we can do better down the road. So you'll see here, we click here, opens up in a new window, and it should. Sweet. It has our text, whole deal, right? You can see this query string goes on for a very long time. Nice. So we have our buttons. Now it's just a matter of making it look nice, right? We, if I remember correctly, we had a green background, and to set the background of the whole application, we could simply jump into our index.html app here, and we can just go ahead and have everything have a background. And again, this BG success is just some Bootstrap stuff to set a green background to go with our color scheme. Well, that's interesting. We'll come back. We'll figure that out in a second. I'm not quite sure why it overwrote our things. We'll figure it out piece by piece. So let's go ahead and create a div now. Oh, I know why. So we'll create a div in our HTML, and we're gonna make it a container, so we get a little space on the side, and we also want stuff to be centered, so we're gonna add the text-centered class, center, not centered, and let's go ahead and pop these bad boys in here. So this will wrap our whole application. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a row, and then we're going to justify the content center so that a couple of our things are centered as well. So let's go ahead and div.row, and then we'll justify content center. All right, and Control X, and let's paste that in there, and let's see what we have so far. You know what? Let me actually take this off because this is throwing me for a loop right now. Actually, let's see what happens. Yeah, let's take off this index.html. I wonder why that's so strong. Oh, I think our card will fix it when we add it in a second. We'll have a white background with the card. We'll come back to that background. So we have this in here, and the next thing that we want to add, so we want to add a card element. Now this is just our card class here on a div, and we want to make that text green that's in there. So we're gonna go ahead and add everything that's in here, text-success, and that'll make it green. And then we'll go ahead and copy these bad boys in there. And let's see if that gives us. All right, so there's our buttons. You can see they're centered. And let's see, we should have a card, which is just gonna give us a little bit of, oh, you know what? It only gives us around the edges there. So we have to add our text to really see anything. But it is there. And I don't want my card to touch the top of the page. So we're gonna go ahead and add mt-5, and that's gonna add margin top and then a large amount of padding. And then in here, we are going to create a block quote with the class equal to block quote. And we'll go ahead and add text-center, although I don't think I need, let's actually leave it off there. I think it should inherit it from the container. And within here, within our block quote, we're then going to create a paragraph tag. And this is going to have the margin bottom -0, so no margin. And then this is also going to add a P3 padding class. These are all just defaults that are part of Bootstrap 4. Probably one of my favorite things is the margin and the padding aspects for Bootstrap 4. Now, next, what we want to do is we want to add a big quote, right? A big green quote that shows up as we're trying to use it. Oh, also on our card, we wanted to give it a minimum width of 30 rem. So let's go ahead and add this to the card. Skip that. Sweet. All right, so here we want to add the fa.fa dash quote dash left, and then we're going to make that a little bit large. So we're going to add the fa dash lg, and that will be our quote. And then within the paragraph, just put a little space here, and we'll just use a little bit of string interpolation here, and we'll say quote, our quote object, and then quote. Let's go and refresh and see what we're working with so far. So you can see we got pushed down a little bit, and now we have, whew, that's quite big. I might have to, that's doing something. I don't know, it's not doing what we want it to do, but we're. All right, not quite there yet, but almost. So we want to go ahead and add the author as well. We haven't actually added the author. Jump back into here, and in here we have, within our block quote, we have a footer with the class of block quote dash footer, and block quote footer has its own sort of class, so we're just going to add text dash success to it to overwrite that. And because we don't need to add anything nested in the tags, we'll just use a little bit of property binding, and we'll set the inner text equal to quote.author to inherit from our author. And we will go ahead and wrap these two buttons in a single div and throw them into here. Let's see, we have BTN outline success, and I believe I wanted to give each one of these a little bit of spacing. So we'll go ahead and what did I put? M2? Yeah, M2 looks good. And we'll go ahead and add a little bit of margin around them, and M-2. Go ahead and save that. So you see we have our so that's off a little bit. Why is it off a little bit? We can center it, but at the very least it should have Do we have one too many divs? All right, let's see if this fixed it. Okay, there we go. All right, cool. So all we really have left to do now is we just need to go ahead and add the green background. And I think now that we have everything set up with our card and everything, it shouldn't overwrite it. If it does, I'm gonna be very confused. Let's go and save that. And we should be good to go. There it goes. All right. Yeah, so at the end of the day, we just go ahead and click this. You'll see we can go ahead and get rid of that console log. You don't ever want to leave debuggers or console statements in your code, and try to eliminate as many comments as you can once you kind of get better at naming your appropriate functions. And that's our app. That's our Angular app. Pretty straightforward. I know I brushed through a lot of the CSS. It's all Bootstrap classes, so if you're not familiar with it, just go to getbootstrap.com and go ahead and tweet this, and you'll see a small house must depend, and we click this again, right? Just to make sure, hey, is it actually resetting? Do a little bit of debugging. Is this what we thought it was going to be? And it is, right? So everything's working. I hope you guys found this little project fun and exciting. I've done this in jQuery. I thought, hey, might as well do it in Angular real quick. I think some of you guys would like some entry-level projects and that sort of stuff. So thank you so much for watching the video. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share, support me on Patreon, and donate. Do all that great stuff if you can. If not, just come back and watch these videos. I appreciate it. The best thing that you guys can do is just support me over the long term and continue showing up. It's great to be able to have a YouTube channel and have that support. So thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey guys, if you like this course and you're looking for something a little bit harder, not too hard, but I would recommend my Angular 360 Part 1 course. It's a one-off project that's you building a personal portfolio. It's about 3 hours of content. We do wireframes, we build out the project, we then refactor the project, and then we also add additional features for you to build onto after the fact. It's an entry-level project. It's about one step harder than what we just did. So if you're looking to continue on with Angular, I'll include a link to this in the description below with the coupon code that'll get it for $10. So thanks for watching the tutorial, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey guys, if you're looking for a fun little project to do, I have my very first course out called Learn Angular by Projects Part 1, where we build a personal portfolio. It's about 3 hours of content. It's one project. It's not going to teach you everything in Angular by any means, but it's a great way to get your feet wet. You can go ahead and check the link down below, get a coupon code, Coding God, or just click the icon.